dan, dragi kolegi, lepo vas pozdravljam na današnjem predavanju, ki ga bo imel profesor dr. Georg Vogeler o digitalni humanistiki in o metodah, ki so uporabne v zgodovinopisju in sploh v besedilnih vedah, kjer nastopa veliko digitalnih podatkov povezanih z osebami, kraji, časi in podobno. Profesor Vogeler je specialist za digitalno diplomatiko, to je njegovo osrednje področje. Aktiven je na univerzah v Münchnu, Gradcu in na nekaterih raziskovalnih centrih v Avstriji, zlasti pa v Nemčiji, kjer je eden od ustanovnih članov Inštitut für dokumentologije und editorik. To je ustanova, ki se posebej posveča metodologiji znanstveno-kritičnega izdajanja besedil primarnih virov. Profesor Vogeler je tudi, no to pa je povezano z njegovim najtesnejšim profesionalnim področjem, je pravzaprav ustanovni vitalni momentum, njegov ustanovna oseba portala monasterium.net, ki je pravzaprav osrednji repozitorij za srednjeveške in zgodnje novoveške listine, obsega že čez 500 000 enotnega gradiva, portal, ki vključuje desetine inštitucij iz več držav po Evropi in celo zunaj Evrope. In ta velik projekt je vključil v strukturo Icarus. To je pravzaprav omrežje, tudi dolgoročni projekt in omrežje, ki že nekako financira samo sebe z raznimi storitvami na področju digitalne humanistike, namenjeno povezovanju arhivov v Evropi in po svetu in njihovega gradiva, raznovrstnega gradiva. Profesor Vogeler je tehnični direktor, tako za monasterium, kot za Icarus, in je pravzaprav vodil razvoj te infrastrukture. In zdaj pričakujemo, da nam bo povedal seveda marsikaj zanimivega z tega področja, relevantnega za naše raziskave. Če smo zgodovinarji ali če smo literarni zgodovinarji, v vsakem primeru razpolagamo s teksti in v teh tekstih nahajamo najrazličnejše podatke. Dear Professor Vogeler, dear Georg, thank you for coming to Ljubljana. I'm very glad to have the opportunity to have you here and I can introduce you briefly in Slovenian. I'm sure that your competences will now come up and give us the opportunity to enjoy in your findings, in your experiences, and to learn a lot about the possibilities of digital processing of textual data in the area of history and textual studies in general. So please give us your lecture.
Thank you, Matija. Sorry, Matija is the other Slavic variant of your name. Thank you for the invitation. Thank you for the, I assume, very kind introduction. My Slovenian is non-existent. I know Hvala, so I can thank you, but I don't know anything else. Sorry. I do hope I speak clear and slowly enough in English. If not, please interrupt me immediately. I will try to repeat, rephrase, find some words which are better understandable. When Matija invited me, I started to form a picture of my possible audience, and I'm a bit ashamed that it is obviously a bit different, because I expected lots of PhD students who are keen to learn anything, and now I see there are lots of probably very experienced people in the room, so we'll see if that fits still. I changed the title a bit, because during preparation I thought it best to use these charters, where I'm highly interested in, as an example for lots of methods you could apply in theory and practice to almost every kind of historical resource humanists are dealing with. that would include these methods. Methods like, okay, you can describe something more formally, more structured than I thought I could do, or I attempted to do in printed form. Thinking about, okay, it's easy to create images to make with your films or whatever and publish them. Much easier than it was with the analog methods. You might think about having books you can search through by just pressing a button because they are transcribed somehow, printed books or even handwritten books. You might think about, okay, there's a huge amount of data of text that I want to search in it for my few occurrences of the terms I'm interested in. You might think of having a database, which is a very vague term, and I will develop on it later. You might think about plotting something on a map and show that there is where the manuscripts are preserved, where the documents are written, or whatever. Think about networks. You have probably seen some of those network visualizations. Think about, okay, you can publish stuff, you can discuss stuff via the web. Think about when you publish something in the web, you can click on something and something happens, so it's enriching experience. Of course, you know that computers can count, and so you might expect that digital methods help you to count. Lots of things, words you can count persons, you can count subjects, objects, whatever. But you might even think about, okay, putting everything which is similar together, clustering stuff. Which is a typical computational supported activity. There are technologies you might have read about analyzing grammatical structures of texts, analyzing even sentiments expressed in text. And you might have heard about people using computers to check if something is true, if something is consistent. Lots of these methods I will talk about, not all of them. Because I will follow the way usually people who are interested in stuff I'm now presenting a bit are dealing with. So I'm talking about medieval and early modern documents, charters. I love this term because it distinguishes a bit to every other kind of archival documents, although there are lots of similarities. So let's consider charters. You can have a look on charters if you go to a monasterium. You can have a look on charters which come from Slovenia. If you go on Monasterium.net, that's the selection which is on Monasterium.net in the local archives. There is even more documented via the web. And some of the examples come from this selection, this corpus. A charter is easily explained with an image, more easily with an original. I don't have brought the two originals I own. I should have, but I'm talking digitally about digital stuff, so it's not important. But I love them, the originals. With these, with the charters comes something which is important. Why it is so important to have an image? Because you see by the seal, for example, or by specific setups, layout, already that this is probably a charter, not only a personal note telling me where to go tomorrow. The same thing happens when you go to the texts, which now is not really easy readable here, but that's not the case. I'm just walking through to some of these features which create a text, make a text a legal valid document, and thus changing it from every kind of text into a specific genre, into the charter diplomatic text. So there is a specific clause in the Middle Ages which starts this text, and you know lots of similar things with modern contracts. There is somebody taking responsibility, and you know this certainly of modern contracts, where the name of the person signing are the core, the parties agree. You have this kind of clause which is formalized and helps you to get a feeling of there is something legally happened, to ritualize the event. There are clauses which describe precisely what is happening from the legal point of view, and they're sometimes very reproducible and static, because the legal context requires or assumes that several things are named explicitly, even then we wouldn't talk about them. And you will have methods of authentication, which are usually named in the document somehow, or at least expected, and you have some place and a time when this legal event, which is documented, happens or happened. That's typical structured way. They could read in this way, which is not a transcription, and you understand much better than me. I have a rough idea what's told there, which is the summary of the legal content. So all this stuff which makes the text a legal text or a formalized original text is somehow left out and reduced to the facts in the text, and that's again something which is important for understanding charters, because charters have all these three levels of interpretation and function. They are documenting a legal fact, which is a fact in the sense at least that somebody thought it worth to write about it. They put it into a specific form, and by this form they create legal credibility and make it usable in a legal context. So what's interesting from this point of view, they document facts, which could be the facts documented officially, but which could be facts documented by accident, naming stuff which is just transferred, or naming a witness or whatever, telling a story, which you might be much more interested than in the legal fact, and they could be forged. So they could look like something which is a fact, but they aren't the fact what they are documenting. And they are definitely a text, so they document linguistic stuff, and charters are very important resource for getting a grip on the natural language in a very detailed, localized and dated way, much better than you have in manuscripts, where the dating and localizing is sometimes very rough, if you are unlucky that you have a colophon and people telling you who wrote it when. Because, and that's the important point, they carry a date and a place usually, and so whatever comes up is referred to this. And they're of course a cultural product, so you can discuss with them who used them, why were they used, in which form they were used, from which examples the people used, so traditions, ways of moving around, of cultural forms of activities. The example I took is from a paper from Reinhard Hertel, who studied lots of documents from the Patriarch from Aquileia, and he made a rough description of what happens in the northeastern part of Italy and this neighborhood around here. Where came the influences in charter production come from? Could be highly interesting. So that's all stuff which is interesting in it, and that's the same if you do it with diplomatic methods. So it doesn't change at all. The document, the object, is still the same, and the interest in it is usually the same, although the idea you form about it can change by the methods you use. Basic methods people are using with charters can be described as these. They are digitized, so they are somehow represented in a digital form. You apply formal description to it. You do annotation. You search them. You start to analyze them, and you talk about them and create your knowledge about them and communicate about them with digital methods. The last point is the point I personally am least interested in, even if I'm using it sometimes. But that happens. So I won't talk about the last point. Even it changes a lot how science is done. Okay, digitization could mean, which is simple and easy understood, that you just create an image of it. That's an image from Monastirnet, which I put here because Monastirnet is a resource which takes this approach of putting an image online as a kind of publication very seriously, and says, okay, we don't care if an archive does only put an image online and does not give any description to it, apart from it's part of this archive. That sounds completely weird from the point of view of a diplomatist, a traditional diplomatist, but from the point of view of publishing the documents, it's completely sensible, because they are public afterwards. They are more easily accessible than if you have to go to the archives. So you have in Monastir about 5,000 parts from the 600,000 documented in Monastir. It's not a huge amount, where you don't have a detailed description of it. Monastirnet deals with it in a particular way, because Monastirnet is encouraging people to add their descriptions. And the archivists will control them and approve them. And there are lots of charters in Monasterium who are described very roughly, but not transcribed. So you have only the image if you want to get to the text. I am usually tempted, talking in front of diplomatists, to cite Ivan Klavacek when I'm talking about this, because the term of editing a charter could be questioned by the idea of publishing an image together with a description. Ivan Klavacek said, okay, if you publish images together with abstracts, as the guest done, we create a kind of proto-edition, he called it, because everybody who's able to read the original hand can read the text. So text is there, description is there, it's a kind of edition, isn't it? Well, it's not that typical edition. Okay. But of course, you would think you would like to have access to the texts. In Monasterium, we have lots of texts, 20,000, which are usually taken from existing editions. And you have lots of other texts, these transcriptions from existing editions together with archival material. And you have another part in Monasterium where you have lots of texts taken from existing edition by not even caring about an archive publishing the print, the image, but just making accessible the Google-made transcriptions, automatic transcriptions, which are good enough that you can at least hope to find something. There are lots of problems in them, but they are there, and better they are there and identified as charters than they are just hidden in mastermind and stuff. What's happening? Okay. Books, Google Books. This is one example where you see, okay, there is the image of the print, and if you compare it to the transcription, you will very soon see that there are lots of problems in this automatic approach, because this kind of Latin stuff is hard to read for people who are dealing with vast amounts of language stuff, but not this particular. So I already said that Monasterium is encouraging people to add descriptions. They are not only encouraging people to add descriptions, but even to add transcriptions. So you have in the digital world, in Monasterium and others, GPen is another tool, where you can upload an image or have uploaded an image, have an interface where you can start to do your transcription and publish it there. In Digitalna it looks like this, where there's lots of fancy features, where you can do lots of documentation of what you see. So there are parts somehow highlighted, there are images, there are figures in the text, signs in the text you want to identify and describe maybe. You see maybe there are abbreviations in the text, that's an abbreviation here, markup. There are maybe damages and all this stuff could be documented in this tool. Digitalna is somewhat similar. But in the digital world, the people thinking about creating tools are not stopping at the point supporting the transcription, but they are even thinking about doing it, the manuscript transcription automatically. There is a huge project in, European project. A lead is in Innsbruck in Austria, but the computer vision experts are in Spain and in Rostock and in the Netherlands, in Groningen. They are creating tools which support transcription, again, by highlighting text zones, but additionally suggesting automatic transcriptions. And you see that the transcription of Rosengart after Barbara is, people in France see that, is wrong. The automatic transcription is not good enough, while Maria Barbara is already correctly identified without help of any human. She's called Van Lauten, not Rosengart. Others are better. It depends very much on the amount of training data you have and to get nice results. They come up to 90-95% correct results if you have good enough training. Digitalization is not only just creating a transcription or an image, but can be more. When I talked about the Ivan Hlavacic proto-edition approach, you might have thought about already, okay, an image of a text you can read is not an addition, and not only because I'm missing the transcription, but because I'm missing much more what is part of digital editing. So, digital editing includes reflections about the text and its content and putting it into context. And if thinking about typical medieval editions where you have this kind of lots of similar enough copies and try to construct something, you very often come to a point where you say, okay, I know now something about this text which is highly complicated, and I have to put it on a page, on a printed page. Okay, let's invent lots of nice fancy signs nobody knows than me, but I will explain them, maybe they will understand what I want to do. A very simple example is this one, where digital methods can demonstrate, on which I can try to demonstrate that digital methods change the approach in putting what you really think about the text into a formal structure, into something which is there, even if you don't see it. So, you have two problems. One of the problems is V or U, how to transcribe. It looks like a U, but some of them you know it's a V. That's traditional knowledge, and there's lots of workarounds in traditional editing. The other thing is, it's an abbreviation. It's an easy abbreviation, you usually know what's there, but it's still an abbreviation. So we have workarounds which say, okay, let's do one or the other, just keep the abbreviations or just delete them and expand, or just keep the U or just convert it to what everybody expects. Both workarounds are very well working and good, but they're somehow forced by the need to decide what to put on the page while using digital methods, you could just say it's both. So there is an original transcription and a normalized, regularized transcription. And you can choose. You have the choice. That's one example of how digital editing enhances or changes editing. Another thing, typical thing is that by creating images, there are lots of situations where you say, okay, I see what's there, and now I have to print it, and when printing it, I have to do lots of weird workarounds by transcriptions, descriptions nobody understands, by reductions on giving it a name, and the name might describe the general situation, but not the specific. Seeing this one example from Digitalna. Again, you have a subscription line in a high medieval Italian document, and you see that there are these signs, cross signs and little signs, and the transcription is somehow in a different script. And this different script, you see all of this, but you would, in the end, transcribe it in just capitals or whatever. Even better here, this kind of nexus literarum, you would just say, okay, there's a nexus literarum, but what kind of nexus literarum you wouldn't be able to describe, or it would be taking you half a page. Yeah. But you can link them to the very text. So, but writing it here, you make the annotation up here and combine the two of them, and now you can have the direct link between text and image. Another example from the diplomatic world is dealing with complex situations, is this kind of what is a copy. This is a typical example of Italian authenticated copies of an empress privilege, where you have these signs, and I told you that they're important, the credibility, so the notaries who copied them copy these signs as well, but put their signatures below and say, okay, it's the recopy of the original. So how to deal with it? Is this the text of the copy, or it's the original of the authenticated copy, or is it just the text of the copied text? And with a digital approach, you can just avoid this or make it explicit, saying, okay, transcribe it, and I have two charters in one. One has the status of the original, and one has the status of a copy, but it's still a charter. Descriptions. A page from the NDH where lots of descriptions. I extracted one passage up here where the editor, Zickel in this case, is telling you that there's a specific hand in it, a specific person writing it, which is good and which is important to know. And he's saying, okay, he's writing another document as well. But finding it is almost impossible. If you don't do this, something like this, so formalize this description in a way where you explicitly make clear that I'm now talking about the physical description, about the handwriting of this document. And I'm giving it a name, as I'm doing it in the verbal description as well. And now I can start to search for them. Another example is, again, from this Slovenian text, preserved in a Slovenian archive, because the author is from a Croatian area, where you have the abstract which tells everything, but you don't find who is the issuer and who's the recipient if you don't understand it, while formal description would distinguish them and make it easy to select all documents of one issuer. You could do this using controlled vocabularies where you have the possibility to replace the verbal name in one language by abstract identification and use alternative words which are meaning the same to search. And lots of other things you could do with controlled vocabularies. You can express hierarchies, saying, okay, there is a whole bunch of people involved, and all those people involved in production of a charter, I sum up into a common name, people involved in production of a charter, and I distinguish each role in specific, the person writing, no, the dictator, the person really describe, really putting it on the parchment, the person putting on the seal, the person who is responsible legally, etc., all roles involved are all roles people involved in production. So searching for who is involved in production can be organized in this superordination. With all these examples I showed you, I already moved into a direction which is highly distributed in the world of the humanities when you're working with texts. Because all this formalization, description, transcription is put onto the text, is maybe even put into the text. And you can continue this in directions which go beyond the levels I described now, which is beyond the transcription level and beyond the formal, highly structured description, formalized description. Because you could say, if I have a text, there happens something in this text, there are words occurring, referring to something outside, referring to some semantics, and I can put into these semantics by highlighting or marking up with specific codes using these angle bracket stuff, which is XML, which is the technique which is very, very widespread in digital humanities. Which is just saying, okay, that is a place name in the text, and if you are looking for places, it's a good point to start there. You could even do an interpretation of these places by saying, okay, when there is a place name, it refers to something I'm describing elsewhere in an external database where these places are described with modern names, with localizations on a map, with alternative names, or whatever you want to describe. Semantic annotations is one very widely used, particularly in historical sciences, working with text. But if you go to the linguistic approach to texts, you could do this kind of annotation as well. I'm no linguist, so I'm not showing you an example of part of speech tagging on charter text, unfortunately. But what you could do is, when I talked about, okay, let's do grammatical analysis, is just doing that by hand and putting the information. That's an adjective, that's a noun, that's a verb, that's a sentence, and in the sentence the noun is the subject and the other is the object. Just put into the text and help thus the computer to reconstruct the linguistic structure of the text. What you definitely can do, and which is easily applicable to charters, is marking up textual structure. And I showed you in advance these formalized text parts of the text, which can vary definitely from area, from time, from notary, whatever. So it might be interesting to extract these parts of text, which is an approach getting back to the non-historical stuff, which you could do with every kind of text, and talking about narrative structure in the text, for example. You could try to mark up whatever is happening there according to your preferred narrative theory. One of the results of all these activities is not only just making it accessible, but as I said already many times, is making it searchable. And that can make great differences. If I search for Ljubljana in Monasternet, I would be happy if I could search for Ljubljana not everywhere, because Ljubljana can occur as a name for a printed publication name as well. And thus, the distinction between having Ljubljana in the, as a place name or having it in a bibliography would be highly helpful, is highly helpful. You can do searches where you expand this information about places I showed you all, earlier. And the Knight of Mitterburg, who is issuing the charter I showed you, is affiliated to a place which currently nobody calls anymore Mitterburg, but it's called Pasin, and the Italians would call it Pisino. So it would be really helpful to expand this search. Another example where I did a small study once is you can search by patterns with digital tools. You can not only search by putting one search term, but you can say, okay, De Boer in the 17th did an edition of all the 13th century vernacular German documents and realized that there is in the dating clause a kind of regional divide. People using a dating clause which count, and others do a dating clause which say talk about the existence of time. So that happened when you counted from the birth quote 1299 years, and the other would be that happened when there were from the birth of Jesus Christ to 1299 years. So this is kind of variation, and it correlates to regions. The southwestern model with the counting and the southeastern model with the existence. Now translating this into a search pattern which tells you, okay, come on, there are specific words which could be exchanged. Would be helpful. For example, exchange Jesus Christ our God, because we know in Christian theology it's the same, and we know from the paper from De Boer that that doesn't matter, but the counting on their word form counts. So having something where you can phrase something, put a pattern which says the number of the years isn't important. If you talk about God or Jesus Christ isn't important. In this case, I just put as an alternative both of them. That would cover both of them, or just use one of them. In reality, it looks a bit more complicated because there's lots of orthographic variation to find it. So there is do, da, do, and whatever, nach, von, all these alternatives expressed in this kind of pattern. And with this kind of pattern, you can search in Monasterium, for example. You can search if you have the data as I have. So you unfortunately cannot use that live. What happened when I did this search 8 years ago was that I realized that in the 13th century the Monasterium data fits to the assumption of De Boer, and in the 14th century it started to change. It changes in the way that this southeastern German model still exists, but does not exist that much, and the counting model, the southwestern model, is taking over. Impression by doing this kind of pattern search. With this, we already moved into the next step of digital methods, which is analysis. And that's a very rough and easy analysis. I did only yesterday morning, and taking the documents from the Slovenian archives and extracting all the explicit, formalized description of the language used, and to see that it's not that formalized. You have at least two versions how to talk about Latin, don't know why, and talk about German as well. But nevertheless, you get an impression by just counting, and you see that these documents in the parts of the Slovenian archives have either Latin or German, and most of them are German. Only two of them are declared to be Slovenian by the archivists, and both of them come from the 17th century. which started to bother me, because I yesterday evening learned that in the 16th century, Slovenian language had a first phase of high use. And I was wondering if that's only a mistake of the data, or if in reality the use of Slovenian language in legal documents is that rare as it seems to be. Mattia would support the second one. Okay, good. And counting. And counting can be highly interesting. As I already showed you, that's another example where the results are not that interesting, but the method is already showing where the next step would be. If I have transcriptions, and I have not very much transcriptions from Slovenian charters, so it's only 13, so the data is not very informative. You can put it in a tool like the Voyant tools, which is a corpus analysis tool, which is not doing much more than extracting words, counting them, and displaying me where they occur and how often they occur. And giving me some help by excluding stop words, so words which are occurring so often that I don't care too much for them. And I have made this extraction, which is an accounting, trying to count to show me those words which are occurring in one document more often than in the whole corpus. So they are specific or help me to describe this document in contrast to the whole corpus. It would help me to understand if that's what is specific about this text. Could be one approach. Moving away from counting, but already close to these Voyant tools, is if you count, you can start to create some graphs. And this graph is counting as well, because the size of these dots is a representation of counting. But the more interesting thing about it is that it is a network. It's a network, in this case, of persons named in charters, and if they are named together in a charter, there's a link. And so you start to see that there are people, obviously, who have lots of these connections, and there are people around which have no or very small number of these connections. You still can see these colors are introduced by an algorithm from the software, the Gephi software, trying to show groups of people who are highly connected. So to see that there's a group in this red area and there's in this blue area, lots of people, there's obviously something with one person and everybody else is connected to him. And etc. So that's a green area. That's taking the next step in digital methods from just only counting into visualizing what's in there, what's in the structure. And you can start to think about it a much more informative way. Example is this of the people of medieval Scotland, where you have again these connections of people named as witnesses in the charters. So they confirm that the content is correct. And there's in the period of David the First, there is one person who's named very often, or not only very often, who is connected to many people. Hugh de Morville. And he's in a way connected not only to many people, not only just by just counting, but he's connected to all those other people who are very often connected with others. That's this kind of measurement, the eigenvector. Saying, okay, he's a person who obviously is at the very heart of in the surrounding of the king. And result of a visualization, of counting, of an analysis, of information, of a huge amount of documents. Other approaches to these huge amount. A project where I'm involved in, fortunately, which is realized with MonasteryNet, is carried out by a team of a diplomatist and an art historian and me. where we collect documents, charters who carry images, who are illustrated in some way or the other. That's nice because they look very nice and there's even something happening, not in this case, and they have highly interesting from the point of view why they are illustrated, where they're used. There's a huge part of indulgences where they obviously were displayed in the churches. But they have a problem because archivists usually are not interested in that. So archivists just say it's an indulgence and don't care about if there's an image on it or not. So finding them in the archive is very hard. It takes a lot of time. So we asked a friend of mine who is a computer vision expert, please try your models, your technologies to our documents, and let's have a look if that could help us to identify those documents we are looking for. And he did that. And something came out which looks like this. He did an approach where he took a number of documents, he took a number of documents where we knew what's happening, if there is an image or not, trained the computer to extract features of these documents I don't understand, Christian Christlein even don't understand, so he doesn't understand the maths about, but there's nothing the human brain would have invented apart from being able to calculate, to mathematics. Train this, so the computer has ideas what kind of document could be illustrated, and then test it with another set of documents where we know, and see what's happening. And that's what's happening. So we have the attributions by the humans on the left side and what the computer did from this, and to see that there is enough reliability that you could say, okay, if the computer finds 75% of documents which are illustrated in a set of 500,000, it's much better than if I have to go through all the 500,000 and have a look on each singly, individually. Although we are not that satisfied that there's still 25% which could be there, but which weren't found. That's one of the results. The other results, and there's where digital methods start to become highly interesting from my point of view. It's not only helping me in doing a tedious task, but it's showing that there is distinction humans do, where the machine has problems. The distinction between these two, level 2 and level 4, which says level 2 is something which is decorated but not illuminated. So that there's not a scene, there's no color, there's no highly easily part to identify, which is the visual part on it, but just decorated element. And even in the definition by Martin Roland, he says niveau 2 is only a decoration which is non-usual in the context. And then it becomes maybe better understandable why the confusion starts with a group where no graphical elements are found, because there are lots of documents who carry a small decoration and a large initial. The first line a bit longer letters or whatever, which is not this artistic kind of decoration. Interesting enough to learn, okay, we probably have set up a distinction which is hard to count. Other kinds of analysis to show, one of the easy stuff in the sense that it's the technology behind it is not that complicated, is just putting information about places you have on charters where they were issued, and putting these information on a map. And in this case, even combining it with a timeline, so you can move around and see where Charles IV did his work. Okay, he did probably more work than only issuing charters, when he issued charters. But still, that's something you can do with all kinds of texts. and mapping them and serializing them in a timeline. Or you can even extend it into more sophisticated maps like this one, which Nicolas Perrault did with corpus of, I think he has now collected 500,000 documents, texts from medieval charters, and he's calculating the period where the specific region is most productive in producing charters and mapping this. So you have kind of visualization of the time in which area charters became famous and custom, a usual way to express legal stuff. And you see that there's this southeastern French part, there's in Italy, northern Spain, where this is happening very early, and the farther out you go, the blacker it becomes. In the northern of Scotland, of the British Isles, in Ireland, and the eastern of Germany, in the east of Austria, there's in the south of Spain. That is happening later. This peak of charter production. Anybody who's not interested in charters, hopefully, is already starting to think, okay, I see my kind of objects, literary texts, art objects. I could do the same if I have enough description and enough information about this. When is the Maria depicted in a specific way? In which area? When does it happen? And showing. This kind of correlations can even be put further. Nicolas Perrault did another thing with his stuff. He identified the 500 most common words and the place where the charter was issued, and you see that if you do a correlation between the two of them, that there are lots of words typical in a specific region, so occurring together. Lots of words in the middle which we don't know, they're kind of almost everywhere, and it's not that clear. But in the outer side you have lots of these words which are obviously typical for a specific region in charter, writing charters. Last example, where this analysis can lead to, is done by Michael Jervis, a Canadian scholar, who is dealing with high medieval British, English documents which have a weird habit because, in contrary to what I said in the beginning, they are not dated. So you don't know from when they are. And he said, okay, let's give it a try, take the corpus, create a corpus of about 15,000 documents, and try to find patterns in the wording which present me how, when the document could be written. So he took these, all these documents, 9,000 only, I think it was more, by just using arbitrary word pairs and calculating the distribution of them, and showing that the distribution has peaks where it happens more often. And so if a single document is in its word usage close to this area, it's probably from this time. And testing it with documents where you know from when they are, sometimes by content, you see that it's working good enough to show you how easily applicable this could be. I used an online dating tool Michael and his team produced, and put into a Latin charter from Slovenia, which is dated from 1238, and which is somehow completely out of scope because it's not British. It's dated, so you wouldn't consent to do it, but it shows that this automatic method would put the peak in 1250, and you see that the similarity distribution is in a period where I would say, okay, it's close enough, that you would say, okay, the 1238 is not disturbing. If you go back to the words used for this dating, you will probably start to become nervous, because you see stuff like Omnia Nostra. Come on, what is specific about Omnia Nostra? It's even not meaning anything, because it's just two words aside. Adeo sibi, dictus iudex. Okay, dictus iudex at least is a phrase, a grammatically correct phrase. Augustini regula, oh come on. Lots of these word pairs which were used in these statistics don't mean, by reading them, anything. They can mean. But still they produce somehow interesting or putting forward results. And that leads to my last slide, which I to sum up what I tried to show you and put it back into the humanities context. We've seen that you can formalize description, that you can digitize lots of stuff, that you can use these formalized stuff in searches by keywords, but you can even count with them. And by counting with them, you can start to calculate stuff, relationships by statistics, which sometimes are, well, hard to grasp. It's one of the problems. The other problem is they're sometimes hiding what, or even not considering what to think about it. That's what's happening in these two areas on the right and below. If you go with a research question onto a digitized corpus or create a digital corpus and start to analyze it, you come to results which sometimes are answering a question and often are producing new questions. That's an usual event in humanities, that you produce a result which tells you one question is answered but another question is posed. The important thing about the digital methods is not only that they fit into this humanistic model in general, but to think about what you are changing in your methods and how to incorporate this into the results, into their interpretations. So, if you have a corpus, you have to think about how is it created, how is it selected. Is there a selection method which contradicts everything I want to ask it? Or is it something I can work around? How is it modeled? So what kind of information is made explicit and what is not made explicit? If I'm looking for a place name and want to distinguish place names named in the abstract from place names named in the bibliography, if I have a corpus where this distinction is not made, I cannot do it. So the data model, the internal structure of the stuff is involved. The data model is a bit more than just having made explicit one or the other structure, because the data model tells you what is the concept behind. And an image database is something completely different than an abstract database where you say, okay, you have descriptions of the facts, which is different from a textual database where I say, okay, you have the transcriptions of all of them, and I consider the transcriptions as normalized, so I assume that the distinction between you and we is made like it was in the text, in the methods. And you have to think about your methods. Simple counting is fortunately easily reproducible, so it's one of the very reliable ways. But still there, you have seen that these groupings, this counting in the Slovenian charters depended very much on the way which words were used. So what am I counting? I'm counting the words the archivists use for description of the language, or am I counting the language? Then I have to do the normalization step in between and merge the Nemsky variants. What do I count? What do I calculate? Do I use a method where I can reproduce this kind of calculations, or is it something which changes every time? When Vincent Christlein did this machine learning stuff, okay, that's fine with this corpus and it's reproducible with this corpus. But what happens if I change the training corpus? Is it becoming better? Worse? There's strong warning in the machine learning world that you can overtrain your models, that you can create an automatic identification model which just only identifies what you're putting in, nothing else, which is boring. So be aware that there has to be some area of gray where you don't know what's really coming out, because you want to learn something new. That's to be considered. So then when you start to interpret, you have to be clear, do I have now something where I can have a proportion, so I can compare my selected search results with the rule corpus? Can I do that, or can't I do? Can I consider it as a kind of distribution? So plotting it on a map would say me, okay, there are geographic distances in between, and that's something which I can want to have. And of course, what do I learn from this depends very much on how do I interpret this kind of an archivist is putting the word Andinsky into an archival database. So you get back to very basic humanist approaches, where you do humanities, while using this vast amount of data, while using calculations, while using machine learning and all this stuff digital methods provide. So don't believe anything because it's formalized or counted, but please don't believe anything you cannot formalize or count, because that's helping you to make your assumptions and your considerations clear and reproducible. The interpretation of this is still your own task and your humanist expertise in the context of whatever the discourse of your scholarship provides. So I would say it's worth giving a try. Don't know what you're saying. Thank you.
Thank you, Georg, for this very intensive presentation of problems, issues, and also possible achievements that can come across when we work on sufficiently large corpora with good metadata and reliable tools and so on. So this is really an intriguing and very informative lecture. Now I believe we can start with discussion. Izvolite, prosim, kakšno vprašanje, ki ga lahko zastavite profesorju Vogelerju, s katerim je za njegovem predavanju, s katerim je res odlično dopolnil serijo predavanj historičnega seminarja in podiplomske šole ZRC SAZU, ki sta organizirali to srečanje. Izvolite, prosim. Ja, prosim.
Thank you, Georg, for this very nice lecture of yours. I would have a rather general question, and that is how much or to what extent these digital methods are accepted in the general field of diplomatics so far. I mean, they do a lot of new kind of research.
I have to sort it out a bit. So, one answer is people were already counting even if when they didn't have a computer. So everything which is countable is not in this sense a risk. There's much more this kind of traditional feeling that I learned it in this way. Why should I do it in another way? So that's one of the answers. Another answer is there are lots of diplomatists who are feeling strong about the need of a very individual and close study of each single document, where the corpus approach is too far away. They would say, okay, I have 400 documents and I have to start to think about each one before knowing if it's a forgery or not. And so give me the time to do this. They are sometimes much easier approached by these formalized description models, because they see how that could help to fix what they are seeing, what they are really thinking about. So there are lots of people creating digital editions. Again, take into account that the older the people are, the less easy it is. And the other thing is, and that's probably the last point, that diplomatics is not the kind of scholarship which has a large group which can feels easy in deciding what to accept. So they're traditional in the way that they have the feeling that around them there's lots of people asking them for books, so let's produce books. So don't care about copyright, don't care about sophistication methods, don't care about counting all that stuff. So, on the other hand, Monastirnet is not the only one. Michael Jervis in Dijon, there's a large database on medieval documents, charters. There is in Italy, Gilanzani did it very early. So there are lots of people engaging in this area and producing something. I would say it's on the move, and it will happen a bit later maybe than in other disciplines, because some transition from traditional established scholars to scholars who learned the new stuff already is a bit more slowly, but it's happening already. Many people doing it, which is good.
It's slowly closing.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Some more question? Kakšno vprašanje?
Let me try. I'm a legal historian, so thank you very much for your focus for the focus of your presentation, because I think it was very well suited for me, perhaps not for everyone. You noticed it yourself. I have some experience with, let's say, not really experience, but basic knowledge of how to use and how to search documents digitalized by the Max Planck Institute in Frankfurt. It's for early modern period, and how well it is connected to Heidelberg dictionary of German legal terms. Yeah. So if I understood you correctly, or the way I followed your lecture was that you presented it from the point of view of someone who really controls his corpus, who knows, what gets in, what can get out. And now I'd like to switch the position, and perhaps I'd like to ask you of your experiences from the point of view of not someone who controls its corpus, but someone who is, let's say, not very experienced user, but would like, from the point of view of someone who searches this corpus. Which are the developments from more or less more technical point of view that were developed in the past 20, 30 years? Because I know that in Max Planck, for example, 30 years ago they started with this corpus, and of course in the meantime there was a very expansion of knowledge and of approaches. Of course I'm not familiar with them, but I'd like to ask you as an expert, which would you say are the current, let's say, development? Which is the current development of this area?
It's still the case that people prefer to use a corpus they control. Although what's happening is that there's lots of research in trying to figure out ways to how to remedy heterogeneous and unclear data. And taking these handwritten transcription stuff, first they started to think, okay, let's do full correct transcriptions, aim for that, which is still a good idea, but currently they're discussing much more. Let's do word spotting. So asking the user to find in the text a word in the image they are interested in, and then match this to the background corpus, which is completely not well structured, and you don't really know apart from its images from an archive. And that's a very typical idea of this kind of similarity matching. There's certainly work, not that much, but well, that's for the German. That's even good results in dealing with orthographic variants in the Deutsches Textarchiv. And they have developed nice ideas how to approach that. So dealing with uncertainty and unclear data and heterogeneous data is a research area. And the other thing is that the empirical knowledge from which you can start, which you can reintroduce in dealing with stuff which is not controlled by you, is enhancing, because you have the creation of these control corpora is rising. And using control corpus helps you to see typical phrases, word combinations, variants of a wording, and all that stuff. One of the next steps is to make use of these corpora. In the end, one of the major tasks which comes into this model, this graphic here, is it's not only controlling the corpora or less controlling the corpora, but knowing, understanding the corpus. So the need for documentation and the need for getting into how the corpus was created is an important point. In Monastery, it's the typical example that people are telling me, come on, we can't use it, there is no clear description, and we'll say, okay, that's true. But each archive has its rule. And they created their descriptions by this rule. The conversion to Monastery was made by this rule, which is unfortunately not that good documented. But if you reduce your research and your corpus into this context, you can return to clear-cut assumptions about what the corpus contains in which form. So, in the end, it comes to classical source critique. Knowing what you're using and thinking about it.
I have more, so to say, economic question. I wonder what is the financing background of such a large-scale project as establishing such a huge repositorium and database. Namely, was it did it depend on project grants, or how all this financial construction behind such a large-scale project looks like?
Monastery is carried out by this consortium of archives, and they are currently doing it in a mixed way. They initially did it only by project funding. Currently they are doing it by small continuous support from the archives to the Icarus consortium, which, well, some of the for instance, feel easy, some of them not as much as every time, but still they are relying on additional external money. Monastery in this case is maybe not the best example, or in a way it's an interesting example because it survived even if it was only funded by project money, which depends on a personal activity of some people in Vienna, which just say we love it and we do it. So it's funded somehow by the archives who is funding Thomas Eigner, somehow by the university who is funding me. And this kind of people who are just saying, okay, it's our personal interest as researchers, and institutions who are supporting this. the general question behind, I see behind, is it worth the risk? So how to do it, what is the political frame for this kind of activities? Because having 3 years of funding to create a nice data set, and after 3 years nobody's caring about it and the data set's lost, seems a bit like money is lost, work is lost, something useful is not used anymore. That's one of the reasons, well, yeah, why whenever you build this kind of stuff, you have to take into consideration stuff I didn't talk about at all, which is all those long-term preservation discussion, in which there is a lot of expertise and experience where we would say, even if you close down your project as web page, you could have done it in a way that the data could be transferred, preserved, and preserved by somebody who doesn't have to put lots of money into it, because another data set of 100 megabyte doesn't make a difference in just preserving a repository at all. So one of the most important questions behind is in the humanities, behind your question is, are the institutions who are interested in the humanities, like libraries, like academies, like universities, do they understand that humanists are producing data which is useful and useful for long-term preservation, similar or even more than scientists are doing? I would say even more, because we know already from the books we are using 400 years ago how much knowledge was produced 400 years ago, which could be reused if it's preserved, and whatever we are doing in the digital edition is still knowledge which could be reused in 400 years if we do it right. So that's the political push. Please, Academy of Science, Ljubljana, think about setting up a digital humanities data archive, or do join a common activity wherever it happens. Please, University of Grants, acknowledge that what my colleagues in Grants built is something like this. It could be used like this. What is, from the humanities point of view, coming to a very strong position from somebody who is doing digital humanities, that is the interface and the tools to use it. There will be tools who will survive in the sense that they're used every day and that works by just nobody can live without them. But there are lots of tools who will die, and who will die, and not that a pity. But in particular not if the humanists we are training now get enough expertise in being able to work with the data even if they don't have the one tool. So that's the last political result of your question from my point of view, saying, okay, we have to learn how to work with this data even if some interface tools could die, won't remain. Although, I understand that I'm quite confident that it will remain one or the other way. I got a grant only recently to work on this particular, for example, to see how to improve the long-term preservation of the stuff.
One more question. Let's say that all of us are persuaded by your presentation that the digital methods are worth to be given a try. Now, would you please just make a hint of the first next steps? If a young scholar...
Go to Mattia. He knows many things. But be serious. One thing is certainly look where the people who have experience in your surrounding and try to learn from them. But general. There is one answer is learning XML and working with it is something which is not that complicated for humanists. The younger you are, the easier it is. And only because you feel you don't have already solutions for a lot of problems which work without XML, so you start to build your own solutions with XML. Because this XML, if you might have seen, is a kind of coding which is very close to the text and close to thinking about text. And so I didn't have to explain you much about the syntax about XML. You probably have understood most of the examples. I hope so. I didn't check that. So that would be one thing. And the other thing is that there are lots of tools which are not that complicated to understand. So some of them you can just try it out. Google Anagrams, for example, is something where you can use this kind of word search in the Google corpus. You get a feeling what that might tell you. Be aware that the Google corpus, there's lots of literature about, is hard to control. So it might be not a good way to do academic assumptions, but to gain experience, how that could look like. These transcription tools might help you to create transcriptions which you can export to XML and see what's happening. Learning about the technical initiative is definitely a good next step after learning XML. Gephi is software to produce these networks, so it takes you 2 days to understand them, or 3, 4 maybe, but it doesn't take you a whole semester and a whole fat textbook to learn it. That's an open source XML editor. That's the most common used XML editor in the humanities, which is costs not that much money. And Voyant tools you saw already. Maybe give it a try. Put flat text into it and see a bit again what's happening. Yeah, maybe this is the first. Another answer would be, we are starting a master's course in the humanities this autumn in Graz. Graz is not that far away. If anybody, maybe not you, but your students, is interested in learning it, really, there's the opportunity. Yeah, that would be my answer. Currently, come to my here. I think he's the best person around here. He stays in Slovenia. Okay.
Če ne, se vam vsem lepo zahvalim, da ste prišli. Prav lepa hvala za to. And special thanks to you there.
Thanks to you.
It was very great to have you there and to learn so a lot from your presentation. With all good wishes for Monasterium and other projects where you are involved. Thank you.